For every iconic WWE pay-per-view that gives us epic matches and memorable moments, there's one disaster that makes you want to quit watching wrestling. In this video, we're taking a look at the best versus worst WWE pay-per-views of all time. Kicking things off with one of the most entertaining shows ever, Money in the Bank 2011. While most fans remember this show for its iconic main event, but the undercard was equally solid. Both Money in the Bank ladder matches were fun with Daniel Bryan and Del Rio winning the briefcases, and matches like Christian versus Randy Orton and Mark Henry versus Big Show were better than expected. But yes, when it's all said and done, it was the main event of this show that changed the history of WWE. The entire show was built around one question: would CM Punk walk out of his hometown of Chicago as WWE champion on the last night of his contract? When Punk defeated John Cena in the middle of the ring, the hometown crowd absolutely lost their minds. Then Vince McMahon rushed down and ordered Alberto Del Rio to cash in his freshly won Money in the Bank briefcase. Punk responded by kicking Del Rio in the skull, blowing a kiss at McMahon, and disappearing into the crowd with the title in one of the greatest endings in wrestling history. For one night in Chicago, everyone remembered what made WWE special. But if Money in the Bank 2011 was fun, Super Showdown in 2020 was straight-up torture. Super Showdown in 2020 is widely considered one of the worst shows in WWE history, and rightfully so. You had Brock squashing Ricochet in a minute, Roman Reigns and Corbin in a forgettable steel cage match, and Mansoor somehow got a spot on a pay-per-view card. But all of this would pale in comparison to the absolute monstrosity that was the main event. WWE had built months establishing The Fiend as this unstoppable supernatural force of nature, only for Goldberg to absolutely destroy his mystique and derail his entire momentum. The show would also be voted as the worst major wrestling show of 2020 by readers of the Wrestling Observer newsletter, and is universally considered one of the biggest letdowns in WWE history. WrestleMania 28 was a show built around two matches that could headline any wrestling show. The Undertaker versus Triple H inside Hell in a Cell with Shawn Michaels as special referee was an absolute war. Over 30 brutal minutes, all three men told a story about mortality, brotherhood, and legacy that went beyond wins and losses. The main event between The Rock and John Cena lived up to a year of relentless hype. It wasn't a technical masterpiece, but the crowd's investment did most of the emotional heavy lifting. Sure, the undercard had its problems. Sheamus defeating Daniel Bryan in 18 seconds remains one of the most baffling booking decisions in WrestleMania history, and Team Johnny versus Team Teddy was an overloaded mess. But when the two marquee matches hit the levels they did, you forgive a lot. Mania 28 was worth its price tag. If there's one pay-per-view that represents everything wrong with WWE's handling of ECW's revival, it's this. Often cited as the worst WWE show of all time, this disaster nearly killed the ECW brand before it could properly get off the ground. The entire card was built around an extreme elimination chamber match that nobody wanted to see end the way it did. Making matters worse, ECW original Sabu was pulled from the match and replaced by Hardcore Holly, further alienating the core fanbase. Fan favorites like CM Punk and Rob Van Dam were eliminated early on, which made things worse. As a result, the match turned into what felt like a standard one-on-one contest between Lashley and Big Show towards the end that saw Lashley walk out as the ECW champion. The undercard was equally atrocious, featuring mixed tag matches like Mike Knox and Kelly Kelly versus Ariel and Kevin Thorne, Daivari versus Tommy Dreamer, and a tag team match featuring the FBI. The only saving grace of this show was a decent tag team bout between the Hardy Boys and M&M. But apart from that, nothing about this show screamed extreme. The show set record low buy rates and was so poorly received that Paul Heyman either quit or was fired immediately afterward. Upset about how the event turned out, ECW originals like Tommy Dreamer and Stevie Richards asked for their release. When your pay-per-view is so bad it threatens an entire brand's existence, you know you've achieved something truly special in all the wrong ways. Fortunately, WWE had already proven they could get ECW right earlier that same year with ECW One Night Stand 2006. Unlike its predecessor from 2005, this wasn't just a nostalgia trip. It was a legitimate pay-per-view that delivered on every level. The show peaked with an absolutely electric WWE Championship match between John Cena and Rob Van Dam at the Hammerstein Ballroom, where the hostile New York crowd's anti-Cena attitude reached new heights. RVD's victory was met with a loud pop, and the visual of him holding both the WWE and ECW titles was iconic. The supporting matches maintained that same energy, with Kurt Angle and Randy Orton delivering another decent encounter, and Rey Mysterio versus Sabu, providing the perfect blend of high-flying action and hardcore intensity. What made this show special was how it captured the raw, rebellious spirit of the original ECW while still feeling like a polished WWE production. WWE's debut on the ESPN app should have been a statement. Instead, it was an underwhelming disaster. ESPN's own in-house reviewer gave the show a C. That tells you all you need to know about this mess. Triple H had been ruining Cena's retirement tour for months. Then he booked a carbon copy of Cena and Lesnar's Summerslam 2014 squash match, with Lesnar hitting 6 F5s and demolishing Cena. The same ending 11 years later, with no new context and no new story, just made it feel lazy. The main event, Cody Rhodes defending the undisputed WWE Championship against Drew McIntyre, felt flat and predictable. The saving graces were buried in the middle of the card. The mixed tag team match between CM Punk and AJ Lee against Seth Rollins and Becky Lynch was fun, but a great ESPN debut show needs big, memorable moments. WrestlePalooza barely had any. WrestleMania is supposed to be the showcase of the immortals, but WrestleMania 34 felt more like a showcase of missed opportunities and creative bankruptcy. Despite taking place in the massive Superdome and featuring several dream matches on paper, the execution of the show was consistently disappointing. The main event between Roman Reigns and Brock Lesnar was a mess. A slow, plodding affair that the New Orleans crowd rejected, culminating in yet another Lesnar victory that pleased absolutely nobody. The show's length became torturous, clocking in at over 7 hours including the pre-show, with far too much filler and not enough substance. Charlotte Flair breaking Asuka's undefeated streak felt premature, while the SmackDown Tag Team Championship match was so forgettable it might as well have not happened. The show did have some bright spots like the return of Daniel Bryan and the opener triple threat for the Intercontinental title, but forgettable bouts for the US title and Women's Championship drastically slowed down the pace. Even promising matches like AJ Styles vs. Kimura underwhelmed, failing to live up to the standards set by their incredible New Japan encounter. Cena vs. Taker ended in mere seconds, while the main event felt like slow torture. By the time the show mercifully ended, fans were exhausted rather than entertained. After WrestleMania 34's disappointing showing, fans hoped Backlash would provide some redemption. Instead, WWE doubled down on mediocrity and delivered one of the most frustrating Mania follow-up shows in recent memory. The event started promisingly with Seth Rollins and The Miz delivering an excellent Intercontinental Championship match. Unfortunately, that proved to be the show's only bright spot. The highly anticipated rematch between AJ Styles and Shinsuke Nakamura for the WWE Championship ended in a draw, leaving fans feeling cheated after months of build-up. Roman Reigns versus Samoa Joe dragged on for ages, with the crowd actively turning on the match and heading for the exits before it even finished. Perhaps most insulting was a lengthy segment featuring half the roster in the middle of the show that did nothing to elevate any superstar or further any storyline. Daniel Bryan's return to singles action against Big Cass should have been triumphant, but instead highlighted how limited Cass was as a performer. By the time the show ended, it was clear that WWE's creative mess extended far beyond WrestleMania. However, 11 years before this disaster, Backlash 2007 had shown how a post-WrestleMania show should be booked. Backlash 2007 felt like a natural continuation of WrestleMania 23's storylines while establishing new directions for the company's top stars. The show's main event saw John Cena, Shawn Michaels, Randy Orton, and Edge competing in a fatal four-way for the WWE Championship that delivered drama, great in-ring action, and unpredictability. The finish of the match with Cena collapsing for the pin still remains one of the most memorable climaxes in WWE history. The Undertaker continued his post-WrestleMania momentum with a solid encounter against Batista that showcased both men's power and intensity. The Last Man Standing encounter was an absolute classic that solidified both men as the top guys for the blue brand. Though the undercard had some stinkers like Vince humiliating Lashley, what made this Backlash special was how every match felt purposeful and advanced ongoing stories instead of wasting the fans' time. SummerSlam 2013 was built around two all-timers with a strong undercard. CM Punk vs. Brock Lesnar was a battle of different styles as the underdog Punk tried to take down the Beast, who looked unstoppable. Punk took an absolute beating and kept clawing back, with Paul Heyman hovering at ringside. Lesnar won the battle, but Punk left looking like the toughest man in the company. This could have easily been the match of the night, but then John Cena and Daniel Bryan topped it. Bryan pinning Cena clean in the middle of the ring, winning the championship after months of being told he wasn't the right guy, was a moment worth the price of admission alone. But then, Triple H immediately pedigreed the new champion, and Randy Orton strolled down to cash in the Money in the Bank briefcase, kicking off a storyline that would define the next year of television. Some fans were furious. Others appreciated the longer play. But in the moment, watching Bryan's win get ripped away seconds after it happened was genuinely gutting. The undercard did its job. Alberto Del Rio and Christian had a decent world title match. Bray Wyatt made his Summerslam debut in a Ring of Fire match against Kane, and overall, it was one of the best shows of the decade. But 6 years before SummerSlam 2013, we got one of the most frustrating shows of all time. Unforgiven 2007 was exactly that, an unforgivable waste of time and money that left fans questioning their loyalty to the product. The show's semi-main event between Randy Orton and John Cena ended in 7 minutes when Cena was disqualified for being too aggressive. The finish felt like it belonged on a weekly episode of Raw rather than a pay-per-view where feuds are culminated. The Undertaker's return from injury in the main event should have been a triumphant moment, but his match against Mark Henry was a slow, plodding affair that highlighted how poorly both men were being utilized. The world title triple threat between Khali, Batista, and Mysterio felt uninspired, and the undercard mostly wasted names like Kane, CM Punk, and Triple H in forgettable matches that did nothing to advance their characters. It's truly a shame because just the year before, WWE had delivered an all-time classic at Unforgiven 2006. Unforgiven 2006 built effectively on the fallout from SummerSlam and delivered several memorable encounters that justified fans' emotional investment. The show's highlight was an absolutely brutal Hell in a Cell match between D-Generation X and Mr. McMahon, Shane McMahon, and The Big Show that perfectly captured the intensity of their ongoing war. The sight of Shawn Michaels and Triple H systematically destroying Vince and his son remains one of the most visceral moments in Hell in a Cell history, while the match's conclusion felt like a natural climax to months of storytelling. John Cena and Edge continued their excellent rivalry in the main event with a tables, ladders, and chairs match for the WWE Championship that showcased both men's willingness to sacrifice their bodies to become the top guy on Raw. The undercard maintained that same level of quality, with Trish Stratus delivering an emotional farewell in her hometown of Toronto against Lita. Even smaller feuds like Kane vs. Umaga and Jeff Hardy vs. Johnny Nitro felt important and well-crafted, creating an overall show that felt cohesive and satisfying from beginning to end. The show also saw Randy Orton delivering a mid-air RKO to Carlito years before mid-air RKO became a thing, so that gets a plus point. Many fans consider WrestleMania 17 as the greatest wrestling pay-per-view ever produced. The main event between Stone Cold Steve Austin and The Rock for the WWF Championship served as the emotional finale of the Attitude Era. But this show wasn't carried by one match alone. The TLC match between the Hardy Boys, the Dudley Boys, and Edge and Christian remains one of the most insane things ever done in a wrestling ring. Triple H vs. The Undertaker delivered a brutal brawl that lived up to both men's reputations. Kurt Angle and Chris Benoit went out there and put on a wrestling clinic. Vince McMahon and Shane McMahon had a street fight that was more physical than it had any right to be. The Hardcore Championship triple threat between Kane, Big Show, and Raven brawled all over the arena and somehow stole the show for 10 minutes. 68,000 fans in the Houston Astrodome. Jim Ross and Paul Heyman on commentary. A loaded roster. This was WWE firing on all cylinders. However, a decade after this masterpiece, we got one of the most infuriating shows of all time. What should have been a celebration of wrestling's most beloved match concept instead became a masterclass in tone-deaf booking. The Rumble match itself started promisingly, with CM Punk's early entry generating huge excitement from the Pittsburgh crowd. However, when Punk was unceremoniously eliminated by Kane and never returned, the audience's mood shifted dramatically. The crowd's rejection was so visceral that it even booed Rey Mysterio simply for not being Daniel Bryan. Batista's inevitable victory was met with nuclear heat, not the triumphant return WWE had envisioned. The show also saw John Cena and Randy Orton compete in arguably their worst match ever, and even the undercard suffered from this creative constipation, with Bray Wyatt versus Daniel Bryan being the night's only bright spot. However, for every horrible Rumble event, there's one that had the entire fanbase buzzing. 7 years earlier, Royal Rumble 2007 demonstrated how the event should function when WWE's creative team is firing on all cylinders. The Rumble match itself was a masterpiece. The Undertaker's victory felt both surprising and inevitable, as his late entry and systematic elimination of top contenders cemented him as the WWE's premier gunslinger. Shawn Michaels' performance was particularly noteworthy, lasting over 40 minutes and reminding everyone why he was the showstopper. Rated RKO's presence added an element of unpredictability that kept fans guessing until the final moments, and even names like CM Punk and Shelton Benjamin got their time to shine. The supporting matches elevated the entire card, with John Cena and Umaga delivering a historic last man standing match for the WWE Championship. Umaga's dominance throughout the match made Cena's eventual victory feel truly earned and cemented Cena as a fighting champion. Batista vs. Mr. Kennedy for the World Heavyweight Championship was better than expected, while the tag team division played its part with another installment in the Hardy Boys vs. MNM saga. Overall, this remains one of my favorite shows till date. The Great American Bash in 2006 was a SmackDown disaster that bombed before it even started. Stars like Bobby Lashley and the Great Khali were all pulled from the show before bell time due to elevated liver enzymes. Mark Henry had already been injured the previous week. The card that fans paid for had largely evaporated. Their replacements, Mr. Kennedy stepping in for Henry against the returning Batista, had no storyline purpose and produced a flat finish that satisfied nobody. The main event between Rey Mysterio and King Booker for the World Heavyweight Championship was the best thing on the show, but felt like a lousy ending to Rey's title run. The Undertaker vs. Big Show in the first ever Punjabi prison match was supposed to be Undertaker vs. Khali. Show was substituted in at the last minute. What followed was one of the most painfully slow and awkward gimmick matches in WWE history, with some reviewers even giving it a negative rating. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to subscribe and check out this video next about the best versus worst WrestleMania main events of all time.